So, hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of 20 Questions with. My name is Eunice, and I will be your host for today. So, I'm really excited about this episode because we have Andrew here with us. So, Andrew, I've been reading a little bit about you and your history, and it's just so inspiring. So, I'm really looking forward into diving deep into this conversation. So, I thought we could start by, it'd be helpful to just hear a little bit about you, who you are, where you grew up, that sort of thing. So take it away.
Sure. First and foremost, good morning, right?
Good morning, yeah.
Very good morning, Eunice. Really a privilege to be able to share, on this platform with 20 questions. My name is Andrew Ong, O-N-G, and I'm 43 years old. I'm the co-founder of a ground-up initiative called Break the Cycle, SG. Right? SG is just an acronym for Singapore.
Right.
So we support ex-offenders to break the cycle of recidivism by achieving positive life goals through cycling. I'm also currently working full-time as an assistant director for a charity called HCSA, Community Services. And of course, I'd like to add that I'm happily married. Growing up, I was like any other kid in Singapore. That was in the early 80s to 90s. Back then, Singapore was booming economically and the population was growing. Then it was Singapore just had a population of 3 million, and today we are a population of 5.5 million. I mean, I'm sharing this just to give you a sense of the context of Singapore, and especially for those who are unfamiliar with Singapore, we are not part of China, okay? We are a sovereign city-state, an island city, fondly also known as the little red dot, right? So that gives you impression or perspective of how small we are as a country, that we need to be a red dot on the map to be spotted. So if you're wondering how small, right, to travel from the east to west in Singapore, it just takes 50 kilometers or just 31 miles from east to west.
Wow. Wow.
And 17 miles from south to north.
Oh, wow. Very small.
Very small, right? So a total land space about 720 square kilometers. That's small, right? So you can see that life is so boring. But no, I'm just kidding. Yeah, but we are a bustling city, right? So enough about the geographical lesson. But back to my growing up years, as I was saying, I was like any other kid in Singapore, and I was part of the education system where it is compulsory in Singapore to go to a local school. Minimally, you have to complete your elementary level. That is by law. Every parent must send their children to school. So I'm not too sure about the states. So after completing my elementary level, I was doing okay. Life was normal, and I advanced to a secondary school. Secondary school would mean an equivalent to your middle school level in the United States. And in Singapore, we have a streaming system. There are two tracks, one is the express, one is the normal. The express takes 4 years to progress into high school, while the normal track would take 5 years. Yeah, so I was in the express stream.
Oh, fantastic.
Which means growing up, I was supposed to be smart,
Yeah.
But the truth is I wasn't very studious or bright, but I was outstanding. What I mean by outstanding, I was mostly standing out of my class or disrupting lessons or being late. Yeah, but anyway, that was how I was growing up. I was just restless, playful, disruptive. I was doing okay in my studies. Not an A student or sort, but yeah.
So would you say there was anything in your childhood that made it easier for you to be disruptive and meant that school was not so interesting for you from the very beginning?
Yeah, Perhaps I wasn't a very academic inclined student. I was creative, in my thinking, and so I did not learn the way that through memorizing, formulas or
Yeah.
theories and stuff. I was maybe a more hands-on person. So classes were boring to me. I wasn't really fully engaged. So
Right.
I spent most of the time disturbing other of my classmates while they were trying to study hard. I was just thinking of playing outside, getting
Other
out there.
things. Yeah. And was
Yeah.
there anything in your home life, Andrew, in the way that you were brought up at home that you think contributed to, you finding it hard to engage in school or wanting to pursue like academics from that young age?
I guess for me growing up, you won't think much, right? I mean, because you're placed in a system, you're placed in an environment just to follow. And at that age, you don't have that critical thinking. Why are you doing the things that you're doing? So of course, you just study because you're told to do so, and it's part of growing up. Yeah. But the truth of the matter was, I wasn't really interested in studying.
Okay.
Really didn't have the motivation.
Right.
Yeah, and I think all hell broke loose, when especially during the period when my parents' marriage was going through a bad patch.
Yeah.
Which eventually ended in a divorce. I was 14 to 15 years old then. Yeah, so during that period, I avoided going home because there were constant quarreling going on almost every day, every night. It was really bad and ugly. It was like a war zone at home. So literally, I really disliked going back home. I disliked being caught in between them and having to sort of take sides, because they're parents, right? So gradually, I just truly lost interest in my studies, and as I didn't see the point of studying hard anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I believe, like me, most of us would agree that when we were young, or even now, the motivation to do a lot of things, right, is because of our parents.
Yeah,
To
absolutely.
make them proud, right? To make them proud, to gain their approval, right? So when that factor sort of disintegrated, in my life, I didn't find that foundation, that motivational factor to carry on, to have that interest. So for me, I eventually dropped out from school in my final year when I was supposed to take my O levels, and I decided, as I said, it wasn't worth the effort or my interest anymore to study and just be a good boy, So that was the beginning of down that wrong path.
Yeah.
For me.
Yeah. So can you tell us, so if you weren't going to school and, home was not a place that you wanted to be, what were you doing? Where were you going? Who were you engaging and interacting with?
Yeah, I mean, I remember, I would pretend to go to school, wake up, but I would be going to my friend's place or just hang out at the shopping mall where there's a game arcade, just playing games, or
Right.
Playing basketball with my friends.
Right.
Doing everything but studying.
But studying. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I know that then this later led to you joining a gang. Can you tell me a little bit more about being in a gang and what that was like, how you got involved? Yeah, that would be really interesting.
Sure. So as I mentioned, as my studies was taking a nosedive, I started to drift from my classmates, right, who were mostly the studious type, or bunch. I decided I wanted to make new friends who were more fun, who fitted in my, in the way that I wanted to spend my time. So these were the cooler kids, So they mostly stayed behind to play basketball, play snooker, hang out at game arcades after school. Of course, one thing led to another. I realized some of them were part of the gang. I was invited to join the gang, and I did. It was quite simple. I mean,
right.
Back then, so there isn't any of those. I mean, we were young, right? And I mean, Singapore is also modern society, so there wasn't those like those secret triad society where they had
Right.
rituals of drinking
Right.
blood or stuff like that. Right. So, but I would just like to add as well, this might come across as bizarre, but with benefit of hindsight, joining the gang did more good for me, actually, during that period, because
Yeah.
they became the family that I needed for
Right.
stability, sense of belonging, and security, which
Yeah.
I lack.
Right.
Yeah. So at that age, especially I wasn't able to process the emotions of which I was going through at home. I had a lot of anger in me, resentment, that I had. So the gang sort of provided the outlet for me, although in wrong ways, but it was an outlet for me to manage, the things that I was going through at the time.
Yeah, and I mean that totally makes sense to me, because we all have needs, we all have, core needs that need to be met. And, when
That's
there
right.
is no safe place, there's, schools not working, homes not safe, people want to go out and have their needs met. And, in your experience, Andrew, is that why you think so many young people get involved in gangs and become part of a gang?
That is, you can say, a very safe assumption to make, but I don't think it's just an assumption. I think it is, there's also studies behind. If you look at those who are in prison, right, or have committed offense, most of us will have suffer some form of trauma.
Right.
And because of the trauma, whether it's at home or outside, or someone that hurt us, that causes to hurt others and to offend as well.
Yeah.
So the offense and the behavior are just symptoms, and usually
of something deeper.
as you know, most of the time the solution is just addressing the symptoms and not really the root cause. So I would agree with you that most of the time it comes with a dysfunctional family background of some sort. Interestingly, I mean, just to add, I was part of a subject of a book. So we compiled a story, different stories of ex-offenders telling their life and how they overcome and, their journey, essentially. So there were about probably 7 to 8 stories in there. And every one of them was a difficult, dysfunctional family that they've been through. Yeah. So that to me was telling, that it starts from the family first. To provide that stability. Yeah.
So interesting. Yeah, no, it does. It's really it's interesting, and it just highlights the importance of, helping families and helping children to grow up in stable, loving homes. It's funny because when I think about Singapore, I think of it typically as a country that's really safe. I don't associate Singapore with gangs and gang culture, but is that becoming a thing, Andrew? Are gangs, is this becoming more prominent in Singapore, especially as we start seeing, things like more and more family breakdown and society becoming more unstable? Are you starting to see, gangs and children turn into criminality? Is that becoming a bit more of a common thing?
I would say currently now, with the new generation, younger generation, I think it is less of a issue. There are more other prevailing issues. But if you think you have time, I can share a little bit about the history of gangs in Singapore. I think it came about, especially when the British arrived in Singapore in the 1819, right? There was a mass immigration of ethnic Chinese population from China as a key labor force. And that's where gangs started to form. Right. So till today, there are still some of these gangs in existence, although it's like centuries ago. Yeah, but back then, these gangs offered a source of livelihood, especially to the Chinese immigrants. They offered protection, and they sort of presided over activities that united them and gave them that sense of belonging because they were away from home, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So similarly, right, I think sense of belonging and all that are common factors which even youths are looking for, which I did as well when I was young, right? Yeah, as what we pointed out earlier, right? These are things which we would want to experience in a family unit that is intact and functioning. When that is missing, we would look for other groups or gangs, to fulfill that. Yeah. I mean, I can just throw in another interesting history. In Singapore, gangs are also known by their numbers. Every gang has a number, right? Aside from the names that they have, and the names are usually in Chinese dialects.
Right.
And they are usually three words. Yeah. So the gang that I was part of then was the number 24, right? There are other numbers as well, such as 369, number 18, 21. So whenever we approach someone or somebody approaches us, from a rival gang, they will always ask, which number do you play?
Right.
Or what number? So that will tell you which gang. So if you say you're 24 or you're 21 or you're 369, you'll know whether you are a rival or a friendly alliance. Yeah.
I see.
So that is usually, how we start the conversation when we meet someone.
I see. Wow.
Which number do you play, or what number are you from?
Wow. Fascinating. Thank you for that history as well. It's really adds context. It's really interesting to hear that.
But sorry, just to sort of run up to your question about Singapore right now, right? So Singapore, yes, it is low in crime, but it is not free from crime. We still have crime happening, but in terms of, let's say, gang related, it has been very much controlled over the years.
Okay.
Yeah, I can give you some stats. For example, an average of 112 rioting and fighting cases which have been linked to secret societies in Singapore. This has been a number for the last 5 years, which is very little actually, compared to the past. So my case, my offense that I committed the first time was also a rioting, a gang fight.
Right.
Back then it was almost like, so in a year, right? It's not, in a year there is only 100 plus.
Yeah.
It's very low. Actually, it's very low.
Yeah.
It's not every day. Which happened last time. Almost every day there will be some fight, some form. So the secret society or gang situation in Singapore is really under control. Right now, these secret societies are largely made up of loosely organized street gangs. So, and mainly by young members, the new generation as we are talking about. So usually they will just switch different groups. So meaning to say, yes, these groups are smaller now, but they are just mimicking what the societies of the past are. Yeah, they're not really well organized. No serious threat whatsoever.
Right. Wow. So thanks for that, Andrew. Going back to your story, so the gang were offering you things that you were missing from home and from school. And how did it turn from hanging out with friends to committing crime? Because could you tell me a bit about the first crime that you committed and how that came about?
Sure. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier about how I joined the gang, right? So the stuff that we did, as a gang, to me back then were quite thrilling, We hang out a lot, we did stuff a lot. Almost every day we were hanging out. Really like a family. We hang out in what we call coffee shops in Singapore, which maybe are cafes, but a bit more how would I say, more public, more
Right.
affordable. Yeah. Shopping malls, and game arcades, void decks of neighborhoods or hoods, just watching out our territories or turf. If there's somebody, some stranger, some group coming in, then we will, like I mentioned to you earlier, what number do you play, just to identify themselves, and if they are of rival, then we will just give them a wallop whatsoever. So there's, that's where, when we hang out, we also learn stuff about the way of life as a gangster, about how to fight, about drugs, about partying and the illegal stuff like money lending and betting and all that stuff. So, but of course, at my age then, as a teenager, we were mostly used for fights. And we did get into a lot of fights, right? So to your question about how I got into the first offense. So I was in, as I mentioned, I was in many fights, with rival gangs, and one of them resulted in me being incarcerated when I was 17. So this happened in 1996. One of our gang members was beaten up, and we just sprung into action and went on a hunt to find the perpetrators, who beat him up. We knew where their usual hangouts were, these rival gangs, and some of us, about 10 or 15, we combed that area until we finally spotted them. So the fight was actually reported on our mainstream media in a news report. So together with my gang pens, we were sentenced to 30 months and 5 strokes of a cane, for this offense. So I actually on that day when the fight happened, I actually thought we got off scot-free because I managed to return home. But shortly after a couple of hours, early in the morning, officers from the Criminal Investigation Department, or CID, knock on my door looking for me. I later learned that it was actually one of our gang members who was caught that ratted on us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So at that time, loyalty was a value that I upheld dearly in my heart, even till today, that I learned through a gang. You don't betray, you don't be a rat. And of course, in the gang, that is a rule, an unspoken rule as well. And so, but through that incident, I also realized that the gang wasn't dependable.
Okay.
As I thought, because when I was in prison, it was my parents who were there to help me. Although my family was broken up, but my parents still came for me, and were there for me.
That must be really hard. Yeah, sorry, Andrew. That must be really hard for your parents to see you going down this path.
Also, I mean, I hope so, in some way. So it was then I decided that I wanted to leave the gang after that.
Did you ever feel bad? Did you ever feel bad about like how the impact your behavior was having on your family? Did that ever cross your mind at all?
Of course it did, but maybe momentarily. As a young chap, I mean, the self-awareness wasn't very high, and being considerate to others also wasn't very high. As a young chap. So it was more about self.
Andrew, tell me a little bit about what it was like going into prison as like a 17, 18-year-old. That must have been terrifying.
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. So it was really a huge cultural shock. I think the first thing is felt very degraded, the feeling. First, your name is non-existent. You are not called by your name, right? You are called by a number. I remember my number was L42001. L means long sentence, or S, short sentence. So my wow. Next, you get squeezed into a cell that is shared with other inmates. I got a cell that was fitted for 4. So that's a typical cell there. A room probably the size of a standard bedroom or even smaller, 4 squeezing inside. Just nice to lie down, you know. Yeah, everyone can lie down in 4. So you can imagine in this shape.
Yeah.
1, 2, yeah, like
Yeah.
that. So in the middle is empty. So your foot will be on somebody's head, your head, or your head will be somebody's foot, you know.
Yeah.
And the toilet is also in the cell. So you do your business openly as well.
Wow. Oh my God. Wow.
Yeah. There are no beds or mattresses. I had to sleep on the cement floor with a straw mat that was issued to us. It was really difficult to get used to sleeping on the hard floor during the first few nights. The other aspect also, of course, is the loss of freedom that needed to be adjusted, you know, with access to media, work, or recreational activities restricted. Not knowing the time of the day or night didn't help too. So there is nothing much one or can do while in a cell.
Yeah.
So for 23 hours, I was locked up inside with just 1 hour to be outside in the yard. Yeah.
Okay.
So how was life like? You know, what did I do with the 23 hours? Mostly after you are able to talk to the 3 other person, you hear all their stories in one day. You know, you can't do nothing. You sleep, you eat, or you try to exercise. But what I did, I read. I read a lot. I never read so much in my life while in prison. I just devour all the novels I could get my hand because it's a way to escape, you know, reading all the stories. Yeah. So I read, you know, John Grisham, Stephen King, Jackie Collins, Sidney Sheldon, Michael Crichton, just to name a few, all their books. Yeah, that's how I killed my time over there.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so hard. I mean, just imagining in my head like what life must be like in prison as a young man, you know, that's really tough. Did you feel, because like, I mean, I don't know about in Singapore, but in the UK, like prisons, you know, they can be a place of reform, but most of the time actually people end up going deeper and deeper into, you know, into criminality as a result of being in prison. Is that the case in Singapore? Like, did you see that with people that were in prison? Did you see that was like the culture there? Was it encouraging people to reform, or was it making it easier for people to kind of go deeper in?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. We know. I mean, it's not just from my observation, but I've seen many cases, friends, and there are also stats to show that most of the time they will reoffend. Yeah, as you said earlier, because especially for younger first offenders or youths, if they are thrown into that sort of company, they would learn more negative things, negative bad habits and knowledge. Yeah, and there's stats also to show that in Singapore, the general population, the inmate population is about 10,000, right? I mean, relatively small compared to 5.5 million, but 10,000, 10,000 inmates or 12,000, out of which 80% are repeated offenders.
Right.
Yeah, you know, 80% are repeated offenders. Majority of these repeated offenders are drug offenses. Yeah. So to that statement, right? There's repeated offenses, which shows that maybe being inside doesn't help as much.
It's not working. No.
Yeah, it's not breaking the cycle of. Yeah, it's not breaking the cycle of recidivism.
Yeah.
Of reoffending. It's a way of punishing, but I think that there is something more that needs to be done, whether is it in prison or outside prison, or both. That is something that authorities or the community must look into, you know, to really address the root.
Yeah. Because that happened to you, Andrew. I know you came out of prison and then you ended up going back into prison. You ended up reoffending. So what happened there? Could you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah. So although I did not join the gang again. I mean, mix around in my company. I guess I did not learn because when you're in prison, at least for me at the time, now I think it's much better, like 20 years from where I was, they have more programs, activities to engage and to sort of rehabilitate an inmate. But back then we were just wasting our time, just waiting to get released. So while you are in there, you are not thinking about how to change. Maybe you might for one day and thinking, okay, I did this and it's wrong, But most of the time you'll be thinking what you want to eat when you go out, who you want to hang out when you go out, the things that you miss, and deprive with, you will not have that cognitive dissonance or conscious to think, okay, what are the steps that I need to change?
Yeah.
There's no guidance of that.
Yeah.
What I should take, what goal should I set?
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't that kind of engagement that helps someone inside to use that time inside to reflect and to make constructive decisions when they go out.
Yeah.
They know what they want to do that is different from what they did.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That's so important.
People,
yeah.
And the people that you make around, usually we will say, okay, let's meet when you go out, when we go out, we'll do this, and then when we meet, then
it's easy to find yourself slipping back into old habits, right?
So for my case, right, how I reoffend, okay, so issues were not dealt with, root issues were not dealt with. My anger management was not dealt with. I told you I had a lot of anger issues, I had a lot of resentment. But all this was in hindsight that I realized, so I got into fights and trouble very often, easily triggered, I reoffended because I was serving my national service in army. All of us had to serve our national service in Singapore.
Yeah.
I had a heated argument with a high-ranking officer. Yeah. So under the military law, I violated. So they sentenced me to the detention barracks for 2 weeks. Yeah. So that when I was there, I just realized that what is happening? How come I'm inside and behind bars again?
Yeah.
And I didn't like that, Yeah. But for me, my own personal experience was that I sort of rationalized that I ended up in prison was due to me not keeping my part of the bargain with God, the man up there, which I made with him when I was in prison the first time. So the bargain that I made with God then was that I would go to church upon my release, and I didn't.
Right.
So after the release of my second imprisonment, I didn't go to church. So that was what happened to me. Yeah.
Right. And because then your story takes a dramatic turn, because you come out of prison for the second time, you're trying to get a job. It's so hard because of your history of offending. What was that like for you? So you've come out, you want to be a new man, you want to start life over again, but obviously your past is holding you back. How did you find that? What, that must have been, and I can imagine, so difficult for so many people who want to change but they can't break away from that stigma, that title of being an inmate. So can you tell me a bit more about that?
Sure. Maybe I just share a little context as well. Even though after the second offense, I did not change as well. Although I decided to go to church. Yeah, it was. I just went to church, to keep my part of the bargain. It was not a hard. Sincere. Yeah. So I was still living the life that I enjoyed, the primary schoolers' wild life, with drugs and booze and sex and all that, girls and all that. Yeah. I couldn't let it go. Yeah, so it was only when I overdosed on drugs that
Okay.
sort of woke me up, you know. So at that juncture, I realized I wasn't in control of my life as I thought I was, or I had mastered,
Mm-hmm.
of drugs, All the time I thought I was in control. So at that point, when I looked myself in the mirror, I really didn't like the person that I had become. I was actually quite disdain, at the person that I turned out. Because I was thinking, how did I end up in this state, from a good kid, in the express stream, now I become such a low life and a jerk. So I realized that it was really the choices that I made. I always decided to go the other way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, when I knew what was the right way. So I decided enough was enough. I just needed to own my mistakes in my life. And also because up till then, I was mostly blaming others for my situation or mistakes that happened to me. I blame my parents, I blame my school, I blame my friends, I even blame the government, Yeah. So I just blame everyone except myself.
Right.
So when I decided that the buck stops at me, that I needed to own my life, that was the start of the real change or the turnaround. Yeah.
Right. Wow. That's amazing. And so with that, then you've reemerged back into society and you're trying to make things right. You're trying to get a job, you're trying to contribute, but you're finding it difficult because, you're getting rejection and people are, they're looking at the label of someone who's been in prison. And so how was that like for you, knowing that you're at this crossroad where you want to change, but you're being dealt with no's because of your history?
So for me, I guess it varies from person to person and how they approach this. But when I decided that I wanted to change, and the onus is on me right now, right?
Yeah.
I actually sort of made my mind. Of course, I went through different hurdles and barriers, but I made my mind that I needed to manage my own emotions, my own decisions.
Yeah.
So for example, if I face rejection,
Yeah.
I don't take it personal.
Yeah.
For example, I won't take it personal. I deem it as perhaps maybe if the employer rejected me, then the employer isn't the right one for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. So take it a bit more positive.
Yeah.
So my mindset was instead of looking to others to provide the opportunities, I need to create my own opportunities.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
a bit different, right? It's a bit different,
Mm-hmm.
because you need to take responsibility of your own life,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, what happened was, yes, there were very limited opportunities for me to progress in terms of career back then as a school dropout. So one of the things that I decided to do was to go back to study. Because when I opened up the career section or the job section of the newspaper back then there was newspaper. There was almost nothing for me at all. Yeah, almost 90%, needed a degree of sorts, so it was damn demoralizing.
Yeah.
And all the jobs that were available were in F&B, retail, or logistics.
Right.
Mainly, much lower wage. So, but nothing wrong with these jobs.
Yeah.
But I knew back then that this weren't what I was interested in doing long term. This wasn't aligned with my passion or what I like to do. So, but I did work in the F&B sector. I was waitering.
F&B. Okay. Yeah.
Food and beverages. I was waitering. As a short term while I was going through my studies. So it's a means just to help me get by. But it was doing my work in the F&B that I learned so much life lessons. I enjoyed, it was a lot of character building, being humble, uh, being building my servanthood as well to serve others. Yeah, all this school don't teach you.
These fundamental. So
Yeah.
it was
Mm.
it was really crucial for you to have that opportunity, for someone to give you that opportunity where you could build those life lessons that you hadn't been able to build. Yeah.
So it took me about 5 to 6 years to get my degree while I was working full time. So when I graduated, you can imagine I was so relieved and happy. and the education did really open up opportunities for me to excel in my career. And it provided me the social mobility I needed to move away from my past permanently. Yeah.
That's amazing, Andrew, because so I can imagine that so many people will then feel like the shame of that stigma, will then feel like the weight of their past and find it so hard to break free from that. But you literally have been able to do that and forge a new life for yourself, which is, it's really commendable. It's really it's very, very inspiring. But actually what's even more inspiring is that it doesn't stop there, that you have founded this amazing cause, Break the Cycle, that then helps people that were in your situation to find the way out. So can you tell me a bit more about Break the Cycle, what it is, how it started, why it started, and some of the people that you've been serving?
Gladly, most definitely. So I mentioned about the recidivism rate in Singapore, right? So the idea of using cycling, through Break the Cycle is actually just a way to reach out to ex-offenders. And it came about when I started cycling more regularly about maybe 3 years ago. Yeah.
Oh wow.
But that only happened after a health check that revealed my cholesterol levels were off the charts. The doctor just told me, if nothing improves, you need medication. So I said, okay, why not? Since I'm cycling, why not take it more seriously, follow a cycling regime, and also watch what I eat, So after 6 months of disciplining myself to cycle regularly, like 2 to 3 times a week, my cholesterol levels actually dropped by 20%, and my weight also dropped. So I was about 82 kilograms back then, then it dropped about 6 kilograms after 6 months.
Wow.
After a year, maintaining it, my cholesterol levels dropped by 50%, and my weight dropped to 66. Yeah, almost 20 kilograms gone.
Okay.
Yeah. So the new lifestyle with cycling, and eating right, really energized me. I felt mentally healthier. Somehow I also became sharper and more focused, more motivated. And I was setting distant goals, speed goals. And every time I achieve a goal, I just had a sense of fulfillment. Yeah. So during this period, also, I got to know 2 friends, of whom are avid cyclists. And they were coaching me on my cycling and also helping me with my bicycle for better performance. And one day I just had an epiphany that all this that I was experiencing and benefiting were quite suited to help an ex-offender. Because then I was also volunteering quite actively in mentoring others, ex-offenders. Yeah. But there was never a tool or you just relationship and we have a chat or something,
Yeah.
But sometimes when you have a chat and you don't have a shared journey, it's hard to bring up values, lessons, to teach, to help them understand, to experience. So cycling, I realized that it is a good vehicle, a good platform just to have a common conversation and experience together. And it is a healthy habit, because if you want to break a bad habit, you need to replace it with a healthy habit.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And cycling also is a great way to mentor someone, as I mentioned, having conversations, doing life, because you're not just cycling. After you cycle, you take a break, you drink, you have a conversation. Yeah, that's where you exchange, life lessons, experiences. Yeah. So and also if when you talk about mentoring, right, when you cycle, you cannot also improve unless you have a coach to observe you, because you can't see your own pedal strokes, you can't see your posture, right? So that's also what mentoring is about, right? Because you need a third party to look into your life as well. Yeah. So I found it a great avenue, a great idea to marry my passion for cycling with my life mission of serving. Yeah. So that's how it started together with, it's just not me. As I mentioned, I had two avid cyclists, right? They agreed, I shared with them the idea. I'm very thankful that they shared the same enthusiasm, and they agreed to come on board. And today, three of us are bringing our different expertise to the table, and just doing this together. So for me, I'm an ex-offender. I am involved more in the community outreach. The other guy, Carter, who is a mechanic, he helps with the bikes. Then the last one would be Joe, who is a cycling coach. So he helps with training. Yeah.
Amazing. And what's been the response to break the cycle within the offending community? Is it something that they've that has taken their interest?
Yeah. When we started, we just did not know where this would go. We started it last year, September. So we are still relatively young and new. But since the inception, we have garnered overwhelming support. Right now, we have a community about 50 to 60 cyclists,
That's impressive.
We have about 20% of them who are ex-offenders. Yeah, I think the important part about breaking the cycle of recidivism, right, is the circle of friends. For ex-offenders, they need positive influence, so
they need a family.
Yeah, correct. That's what we've been talking about. Yeah. So hopefully this provides them that family, which I believe all of us are still looking for, even for a non-offender. Sometimes our family may not provide that and our work may not provide that, but the cycling community has the potential to provide that, because we really cycle very often. Sometimes we talk even more than we talk to our. Really, I think we spend more, like sometimes my wife, she gripes that I spend more time with my cyclist friends than not a very good example, but but that's the truth, of the matter. Yeah, because when we cycle, it's about at least 2 hours minimum.
Wow.
Yeah, so 3 days, 6 hours. We spend about 6 hours outside. That's minimum, but usually it's more than that. Yeah. So
I really love that. I'm not an avid cyclist, but I completely relate to the idea of having a community and doing something on a regular basis with a community, with a group of people, how that does bring people together, that does help to heal wounds and create that sense of belonging, and doing something that's positive as well. I can see why it would be so successful, and I can see why it would work, and I know that it has, because I know that you've won a Silent Heroes Award, which must have been like an amazing point from you, looking at your history and the path that you went down to now, becoming someone who's doing good and then being recognized for that. That's outstanding. So what did it feel like when you were when you won this Silent Hero Awards?
Oh yeah, I mean, of course it was flattering, to be recognized or to be awarded. I think the first thing was validation. You know, somehow, after 20 years of choosing to live right and do what is right in doing good, sort of validated all the decisions that I made in choosing this path.
Yeah.
So the second was affirmation. Not that I sought approval, but the recognition did encourage me to keep on doing what I believe in doing. And lastly, dedication. So to me, it was like when I received the award, it was symbolic to me, in the sense of for me to dedicate my next 20 years of my life. I knew that somehow it was symbolic in the way that it meant to me that this is what I'm supposed to do for the rest of my life, something like that.
Yeah,
to serve my fellow ex-offenders as a life mission. And that's what I intend to do.
That's
so
amazing,
was,
Andrew.
So
Sorry.
to give you an example, like after when I got the award, one of the steps that I decided to take was to go full-time into really serving ex-offenders. So I made a career switch as well. I that's where I am working right now with a charity, HCSA Community Service, where we also serve ex-offenders. I realized that I need to do this more full-time rather than just something on a volunteer basis, to really in order to make real changes in the current landscape or the system. I needed to be in the system to do something.
Wow. I mean, that's great. I love that, because representation matters. People need to see people like you to know that there's many paths to success, and success can look different, when we don't always have to all start out from the same point, when even if life has been difficult, it doesn't have to end in a difficult way, so your story is really inspiring, Andrew, and I'm sure that there'll be many more people who will continue to be inspired by what you're doing and be touched by your initiative, Break.
Hope so.
So what's next for you? What does the future hold for Andrew? And and if people want to reach out or find out more about you, please share where they can do.
Sure. I think for me, what is next? I think my life, as I mentioned, my dedication to the life mission, if I may describe it, is really to break the stereotypical perception that the public has towards ex-offenders. That's the first. At the same time, it's also to break the stereotypical limits that ex-offenders place on themselves. Right. So I think for me, it's being a voice, being in the forefront for ex-offenders is important, not just for the public, but also for ex-offenders themselves. Because I think I'm in a privileged position, not because I'm rich, or anything. I'm not wealthy, but I believe I benefited a lot from many others who have believed in me, and I think I have a gift as well in terms of being able to articulate the interests or points that are of concern to ex-offenders, because usually there's a mold of how an ex-offender may speak or present themselves. But the past 20 years have shaped me in a way that it helps me to understand mainstream society, what their fears, their concerns towards ex-offenders. And I also know the struggles of an ex-offender and their fears and concerns. So how I can be a bridge between both, so that there can be mutual benefits, for integration. So one of the key things that I realized that needs to be addressed, is to change our hiring practices in Singapore, or to improve it, where we need, in a way, to eliminate any employment discrimination against ex-offenders. Because currently in Singapore, when we apply for a job in the form, there's a question there, a declaration of your criminal record. I believe in UK and US.
It's the same,
Yes.
yeah.
And they have started a campaign. I think it's called Ban the Box, if I'm not wrong.
Right.
Ban the Box. Yeah, and but in Singapore, this is not introduced yet, and I think it is about time to introduce some changes to improve and eliminate any employment discrimination towards ex offenders. Yeah, because employment is definitely one of the key areas of reintegration. Yeah, so that is what I
Absolutely.
to drive or bring a change. Yeah.
That's amazing,
In terms
Andrew.
of, but in terms of break the cycle, this coming or next month, this year end, we are embarking on a community initiative where we are counting down the year with a 202.2 kilometer ride. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So together with our ex-offenders, about 40 of us, we are cycling together, complete this. So this in itself is a message of reintegration, and not just a message, but an act as we all cycle together in a group to complete the whole journey.
Yeah.
So that is what is happening. So you can, to know more about this event, you can go to our Facebook or Instagram, Break the Cycle SG, and find out more. If you like to adopt something in your own country, your own city, happy to see how we can work together so that this message is not just not unique to Singapore, but I think it's to all over the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. Wow, what a hero. That's amazing, Andrew. Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story. And I'm so sure there'll be so many people that will be inspired and touched by this. And it's amazing how you have been able to break the cycle yourself in your life, and are leading the way to help others. Fantastic. Well, thank you again for coming on and speaking with me today. It's been a real pleasure having you on the show, and again, to hear your story. Brilliant. Well, that's it for today then. Thank you, Andrew. I'll make sure we leave your details below.